Tyne and Wear. The exit slip road remains closed at junction 65, the Birtley exit, for those emergency repairs. There are long queues back to the Dunstan interchange, taking well over an hour to get through, heading south of Gateshead. On the M6 in Cheshire, one lane shut northbound 18 to Nutton between the Middlewich and Knutsford exits, where a lorry's broken down in the left lane. East London, the A107, the Cambridge Heath Road is shut for investigation work following an accident. And on the Essex stretch of the M25, there are anti-clockwise queues from the M11 to just after Waltham Abbey after a lorry broke down. All lanes are back open now. And long queues on the M4 as you head west away from Bridgend towards Swansea, partly due to a broken down car earlier on, but not helped by a police investigation. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, GBNews.com.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a wine, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Ladies and gents, the election campaigns have commenced. We've got 42 days to go until the general election on July the 4th, but worry not, I've got you. And we're going to get through this together. Stay strong, brother. But I wonder, now that you've slept on yesterday's shock, what are your thoughts on it all today?
They're all a load of
Dad, what have I told you about speaking to the cameras? No more, please. But the big news of the day, Nigel Farage says that he is not going to stand in the election. What do you think to that? Also out today, the immigration figures show that net migration into the country of at least 685,000 people last year. Your thoughts on that one? And I've got to say, something that didn't get much attention yesterday was the launch of a new government strategy wanting us all to become preppers, to get ready for an emergency. Do you take notice of this stuff or not? And so many people have had an absolute field day today with the pictures of a soaking wet Rishi Sunak. So I'm wondering, what has been your most memorable political gaffe? We've got it all to come and more. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour, the Prime Minister says voters should back him if they want the Rwanda deportation scheme to succeed, but concedes flights won't get off the ground before the general election. Rishi Sunak also says he's putting the economy and global security at the heart of his campaign. It comes as political party leaders begin 6 weeks of trying to win votes after it was announced polls will open on the 4th of July. The timing of the announcement came as a surprise to some, with Labour polling 20 points ahead. Kicking off the Conservatives' campaign this morning, Rishi Sunak claimed Labour would do absolutely nothing to stop the boats.
Everyone else is starting to agree with my approach, which is bold. The one person that doesn't is Keir Starmer. That's a choice at this election. He thinks that we should just offer an amnesty to illegal migrants to make us the soft touch of Europe. It would make us a magnet for thousands of migrants coming from everywhere. So that's the choice at this election. Do you think my plan is the right one? Do you think I'm the one that's taking bold action to secure our borders and to stop the boats? Or do you think he's going to do that? And it's pretty clear that on this issue, not only does he not share the country's values that it's a problem, he's going to do absolutely nothing about it.
And starting his election campaign in South East England, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says that what the Conservatives have done to the country is unforgivable and voters don't need to put up with it.
Rishi Sunak clearly does not believe in his Rwanda plan. I think that's been clear from this morning because he's not going to get any flights off. I think that tells its own story. I don't think he's ever believed that plan is going to work, and so he's called an election early enough to have it not tested before the election. We have to deal with the terrible loss of control of the border under this government. We have to tackle these small boats that are coming across. Nobody should be making that journey.
Meanwhile, Lib Dems leader Sir Ed Davey says the Conservatives are out of touch.
For far too long, people across the United Kingdom have been let down and taken for granted by this Conservative government and this out-of-touch Conservative party. But with this election, we have the chance to win the change our country so desperately needs.
In Scotland, First Minister John Swinney says most voters want to see the back of what he called the disastrous Conservative government.
Never has a government deserved to lose more than Rishi Sunak's government. You want higher living standards and a fairer country where everyone can lead secure, happy, healthy lives. You want a national health service you can rely upon. Most of you think that Brexit was a terrible mistake. You don't think Westminster works for Scotland, and you want Scotland to have a strong voice. All of those things sum up what I am about.
Police Scotland has confirmed it submitted a report to the prosecution service in relation to former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell. The husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon was charged in connection with the embezzlement of party funds last month. The force went on to say it's unable to comment further as the investigation continues. The prosecution service have responded, saying connected investigations of two other individuals, a man aged 72 and a 53-year-old woman, remain ongoing. A 64-year-old man has been charged with assisting the Russian intelligence service. Howard Phillips has been remanded in custody after a counter-terrorism investigation into suspected offences under the National Security Act. He's expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for a series of attacks in South London. Mohammed Nur targeted strangers using a makeshift blade to kill Johannita Dogby in Brixton in May of last year. She was attacked from behind while walking alone during the day. Nur cut her throat and she died at the scene. The 34-year-old was also found guilty of 3 other slash attacks 2 days before her death. And a record number of more than 68,500 people were granted refugee status or other types of leave to remain in the year to March. Home Office figures show that's the highest number of any 12-month period since records began. Meanwhile, the total asylum backlog still stands at more than 100,000. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. So alongside me, my panel, I've got the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and the director of the charity World Right, Kerry Dingle. I made up a new word then.
Yeah.
A charity, I don't know what that is. Anyway, you are both very welcome this evening, as are you guys at home, very much so. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay. There's lots of you on there already tonight. I love it. You talk not just to me, but to each other. And, of course, you can tweet or X me. I've got a poll running on Twitter. I'm asking you whether or not you think... Did you see the announcement about Nigel Farage not standing? I'm pondering whether or not you think that is the right decision or not. There's lots of conversation already on the website about that and some very strong opinions in different sides of the fence. I can tell you that. I'll come on to that very soon. But, of course, the starting pistols have now... it was fired yesterday and people have gone straight out of those blocks. I can tell you there's been a lot of activity happening today. Let me cross live to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. She is live in Westminster. It's been a very busy day. Bring my listeners and viewers up to speed with the twists and turns of it, Catherine.
Yes, good evening, Michelle. Well, only 25 hours since Rishi Sunak stood in the pouring rain with "Things Can Only Get Better" blaring from the end of Downing Street. And he has been on a whirlwind trip. Last night he was in East London. This morning he was in Derby. At lunchtime he was in Cardiff. He is now in Scotland, getting all across the UK. His central message, you're going to hear it again and again and again. The world is a dangerous place. Stick with the plan. Don't go back to square one. He's wanting people to think better the devil you know with all their problems. Keir Starmer, he was in Kent at a football ground, got very slick videos going, talking about a working class background. His central message is change. They're saying stop the chaos. It's time for change. They're saying they can rebuild a better Britain. Now, the Lib Dems have been in Cheltenham. And the Reform Party, really interesting. Now, they launched in Westminster, but the big news, of course, was that Nigel Farage has made the decision that he will not stand, he will not lead the Reform Party, he will not stand as a potential MP. He wants to be available to help Donald Trump in the United States, although he does say that over the next 6 weeks, he's going to be out and about campaigning to help Richard Tice. Now, I think despite the fact that many Conservatives were beyond horrified, frankly, when Rishi Sunak called this election yesterday, they'll be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief that Nigel Farage is not going to be leading reform, and let's see how much of a role he actually takes.
Yeah, and I've got to say as well, I've been seeing letter after letter from MPs saying that they're not going to stand in the next election. There's quite a few vacant seats that need candidates filling on all sides, actually, not just on the Labour side. Tell us more about that.
Yes, there are. There's well over 100 constituencies, Conservative constituencies, that have not got their candidates selected yet. Quite an astonishing number, really. And Hugh Merriman, Rail Minister, just the latest Conservative MP this afternoon to say he is not going to stand again. Of course, we've had dozens and dozens. There may well be more. But these MPs that only a couple of days ago thought this was a call they might make in the autumn, assuming that the election would be in November, are now going to have to make decisions much, much quicker. Now, the Reform Party say that they are standing in, I think, 630 of 650 constituencies. I believe they've got plenty of people still to select. There'll be many with Labour too. And also Diane Abbott, remember her, she was suspended from Labour over a year ago over a piece that she wrote that was judged to be anti-Semitic. There's been an internal investigation going on into her. Well, they're going to have to make a decision pretty quickly on whether to let her back into the Labour Party.
Certainly. And also, I noticed yesterday, Christopher Hope, our political editor, he was picking up on some rumours that there was a little bit of plotting going on, potentially, and people in the Tory party not willing to accept that decision that was made by Rishi Sunak. Did anything come of that today or not?
Not at the moment, but it is worth saying the Conservative Party is deeply fractious at the best of times, and I think controlling them or having any semblance of control over them was becoming increasingly difficult for Rishi Sunak. I suspect that that probably also played a part into why he's decided to go now. Now, of course, no one knows the number of letters that have gone into Sir Graham Brady except Sir Graham Brady. But yeah, a lot of speculation that there could be an attempt to stop this general election. I have to say, I think it's very, very unlikely. But then I also have to say, I didn't think we'd have a Prime Minister that only lasted 7 weeks. And I didn't think they'd get rid of Boris Johnson, who got them an 80-seat majority. So, hey, what do I know?
Stranger things have happened. There's never a dull day in politics, is there, Catherine? Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. I want to come back to that Nigel Farage thing after the break, because that has really got a lot of you talking at home. So get your thoughts in on that one. Get over to the Twitter or the X poll and let me know your thoughts on that one. But more broadly, I mean, were you shocked by what happened yesterday, Kelvin?
No, I thought it was appalling. I thought it was quite wrong. And, right, so obviously I'm on the right.
You're not. You have hid that. You have hid that so well. I thought you was here to cheer on the Labour Party. We've got our bookings crossed. Sorry, go on. You're on the right.
They had to build a brick wall to stop me going further right. No, so I was amazed about it. It made me wonder, being a natural conspiracy theorist, about what is it he knows that is coming down the pike that we don't know. It made me feel very uneasy about the running of the country. It was a poor speech. It was a poor speech that had been put together. You would have thought that among the many things that they plotted about was what does the weather look like, right? Why don't you try and make yourself look as grand as you possibly can? All right, it'll all disappear in the 6 weeks. There was a series of things that I thought were massively, massively wrong. And he may think he's clever by being able to keep this a secret, because it caught everybody out, you know, cabinet members as well as parliamentary, as well as anybody in the media, right? I think he's a fool, an absolute fool. And were it not for the fact that I am massively disappointed on the Farage issue, I would be seriously worried about where I was going to put my cross come July the 4th.
That is interesting stuff, and you do seem quite angry about it.
I am. I'm furious about it, and it really made me wonder about what the state of this country is, where a Prime Minister keeps it so secret and in an odd way seems to enjoy it. And then clearly, that was a dreadful speech. After all, Starmer, who normally, you know, your blood pressure is the biggest thing that happens in his day, right? Even he managed to put together a better speech at no notice, and you've got to believe that Sunak at least had 2-3 days a week, or even 10 days, when he knew he was going to do it. No, this was a shocker from the Sunak, honestly.
Blimey, so Kelvin's not happy. What about you, Kerry?
Well, I think election couldn't come soon enough, only because I think the Conservatives need a good kicking. And so, as far as I'm concerned, you know, he wasn't elected as Prime Minister, and so I'm glad it happened. I have to say that I felt sorry for him yesterday. It's the first time I've ever felt sorry for him. Stood there in the pouring rain. I mean, it was pathetic. And unbelievable that nobody could just hand him an umbrella. What is this? But again, this is Sunak and his party treating people with contempt. He was treating his own members with contempt by not discussing it with them. But at least there's an election, and I will use my protest vote or rip up my ballot paper.
But I just want to, like, when you say, oh, he wasn't elected and all the rest of it, that is the system in this country, whether you like that or not. People will be shouting at their screen, will saying, well, what about Brown? He got into a position in the same way. That is just the system. So it's not his fault that he wasn't the one on the ballot paper. And then when you say as well about this rain, because lots of people that are not sympathetic to the Tories, I've been hearing them say today as well, oh, yeah, I felt a bit sorry for him, And then you remember that millions of pounds were spent on a so-called media room during the pandemic, which is, of course, indoors. Then you think to yourself, there you go. Look, if you've not seen him wet through, I don't know where you've been, quite frankly, but there he is. For me, it's the moment when he turns around and you see his back. His back is absolutely dripping wet. But I heard him this morning, and he was asked about this, and he was asked about, you know, your brolly or whatever. And he was saying, you know, I made the decision to go out there knowing it was raining, because that is Britain. It rains and we're stoic and we get on with it, and I'm not a fair weather Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, it's just sound bites, turning everything into, you know, I'm so tough. I just think, insofar as he's tough, he's authoritarian because he's contemptuous of most working-class people. And in terms of doing anything, he's hopeless.
Well, look, on the question of the rain, honestly, if you get given the choice in our country between shall I deliver this in the rain or shall I deliver it in the dry, surely anybody with brains will say, I'll tell you what, do it in the dry, because that's what normal people would do. I agree with the Wally with the brolly problem for him. That's why he didn't have a brolly. It just indicated to me that the whole thing, something as important as the general election, was being done on the hoof, and that's what I really objected to.
But do you think it wasn't on the hoof, though? Because many people will say this is planned, and we'll come on to Nigel Farage in a minute. Don't worry, hold your horses, everyone, because I know that honestly, my inbox, and it's like it's ching ching ching. It's just absolutely full of people wanting to talk about Nigel Farage. Don't you worry, I shall come on to that young man in a few minutes. But do you honestly think this was just on the hoof? You know, no planning, no thought process.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that. But I'm talking about how it played out. How it played out. Now, when you say how quickly, they obviously were waiting to look at numbers. They were waiting for the inflation numbers, and they were hoping that there was some other good news. Why are we doing this in July? That would be my question, right? If Sunak were here, I said, I want a detailed explanation of why you are doing it now, rather than the opportunity, for instance, the reduction of interest rates, which will help, you know, millions of people with their mortgages and potentially the knock-on effect of rents and that kind of stuff. Why have you chosen it now? Explain to me the real detail of this. And the answer to that may well be there are a series of things that are going to happen which will make life uncomfortable. And one of the ones that nobody has talked about is the fact that there is now no spare money. Because interest rates have stayed high, the money we have to pay back to our bankers, because of the $400 billion we borrowed during COVID, means that we have no money, not only not to reduce NI, can't reduce taxes, and that may be the reason. But if that is the reason, then he should tell us. It strikes me as though there is a form of secrecy within secrecy, and it upsets me.
I think that's very conspiratorial, though, Callum. I mean, you might be right, but all that you're saying really is he's jumped ship.
Yes, I am.
He's jumped ship.
I am.
And that may be true, but I don't know that it's because there's, you know, crystal ball gazing, he knows there's some other horror around the corner.
Well, there's a lot of people, I've seen you all writing in, saying, Michelle, I think he's got a job in California or something, and you reckon that he's all ready to go over there. He would obviously argue, Rishi Sunak has been doing the rounds today, he would obviously argue that he's got this plan in place. He'll talk about things like inflation, but actually inflation yesterday, it wasn't as low as predicted, actually. So it might seem like a kind of good news story, but it was certainly expected and wanted to be slightly lower than that. And of course, many people, they haven't actually felt that trickle through yet to our pockets. Of course, you're going to find a situation, and we'll come on to immigration as well, where when it comes to the boat crossings, you're going to have the situation, hopefully the sun is going to start shining. These crossings, 10,000 or thereabouts already this year, that number is going to start increasing. And then you're going to be faced with this situation, which is the Labour Party, they're going to rip up that Rwanda plan. He will be able to stand on that podium and say, look at these crossings, my party is the only one that's going to be able to put a stop to it. Is that a smart thought process? Lots of you getting in touch about that absolute pillock, Steve Bray, as well, about him playing that music. Many of you still very furious about that today. You think the police should have arrested him and carted him off for making a mockery of that speech with the music, that things can only get better. Look, keep your thoughts coming in after the break, of course. I want to talk about Nigel Farage and his decision also as well. Net migration into this country, a massive figure, but the Tories will say, hold on a minute, it was down. What do you make it all? See you in 2.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
I want the WHO to be somewhere we can work together, cooperate, share best practice, be a sort of early warning sign, if you like, for many of these things. But the early days of COVID-19, it looked like they were doing their best to cover up for what had happened in Wuhan. And now they want to grab just this enormous amount of power for themselves. I mean, it was never intended, was it?
No, the WHO was meant to be a coordinating center where best practices were shared, where people had, as you said, an early warning system. But we did see major gaps in the early days of COVID-19, especially with kind of placating the Chinese or a lot of kowtowing to the Chinese about what was going on. And there was a delay in us knowing that this was actually spreading efficiently from person to person. And we also had similar problems with the Ebola outbreak in 2013, 2014, which led to some reforms. But I think that, there's a lot of room for improvement with the WHO to make it what it really should be and a value to all the member countries.
Yeah, which I want it to be as well. Now, look, it's quite interesting that politically, all 49 of the Republican senators have written a letter to Joe Biden saying don't allow this dramatic centralised power grab.
I do think that there's going to be a lot of pushback, and I'm specifically concerned about the intellectual property issues, because what we know is that intellectual property rights need to be respected, that's how we get the innovative medical countermeasures that help us with the next pandemic and outbreaks. And there's a lot of efforts to try and undermine intellectual property rights, and some of that is in that treaty language. And I think we need to make sure that the intellectual property rights of UK and US and other companies that are going to be providing vaccines, developing them, that's respected. And I think that may end up derailing the pandemic treaty as we see it now.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel. Kelvin McKenzie remains, as does Kerry Dingle. Welcome back, everybody. I was asking you to reflect on the situation. You've slept on it now. Do you think that July the 4th was a right move from Rishi Sunak or not? Very strong opinions, I can tell you, from the panel. And I played a clip for you at the top of the programme. Let me just remind you about what this particular voter he had to say when he was asked about his thoughts.
They're all a load of
That really, really, really made me laugh, because you might remember last night I ran a poll, didn't I, saying, do you support July the 4th? Was it right? Was it wrong? Or, quite frankly, could you not care less? You've lost the will to live. And that third option was the one that won out. I could tell you, right, there's been so many people speculating on Nigel Farage. What is he going to do? Is he going to stand? Is he not going to stand? Lots of conversations about the impact of his decision. Well, worry no longer, everybody, because Nigel Farage this morning, he announced his intention with a letter. I can bring that letter up for you now. But long story short, he basically said that no, he will not be standing at the next general election. He said he's put a lot of thought into it. And ultimately, yes, he backs Reform UK. He's fully supportive of that party and wants viewers to, of course, put their trust in Richard Tice and Lee Anderson. But he goes on to say it's not the right time for him to go any further than that. He says the general election in the UK is important, but the contest in the United States of America, obviously in November, is huge global significance. A strong America, he says, as a close ally is vital for peace and security, and he intends to help with the grassroots campaign there. What do you think of this?
So I've been friendly with Nigel Farage now for the thick end of 30 years.
Yeah.
I gave him his first radio gig when I ran a radio company. I think he's made a serious error. I think it's a wrong decision. I thought that letter that the PR handout that he gave there was a disgrace, frankly, because what he was saying was, look, the UK, little old UK, well, very nice too, but actually there is a bigger fish to fry. I'm off to the States, OK? And actually, had he put a little bit more work in there, he could have said what he's now said, which is actually, I'm not going to appear on GB News for the next 6 weeks, right? And I am going to go out and I am going to campaign for reform. Now, look, Richard Tice, who you often have on your station, right, is a good... I don't want to be unkind about him, but a workaday politician, right? Nigel Farage is to many people a shining light. What he managed to do with Brexit will never be achieved again. One man who wasn't even in Parliament managed actually to get us all to vote in a way which some will regret, but others are delighted with. So why on earth did he make this decision, right? Why did he consider that the United States actually was more important than the UK? He could have done both. He can move voters. What he can do if he stood as the leader of reform and talked exclusively about immigration, the audience that follows him could have pushed them through 20%. Yes, it would have destroyed the Conservative Party, but it may have had an effect, i.e. stopping the boats, etc. But now he has let that go. I love Nigel. I'm appalled, really, at what he's done and how he's let down what I suspect is a lot of your viewers tonight.
Well, that's what you've been writing to me about, and you are divided. I'll bring you into the conversation, and Kerry, in a second. But as Kelvin mentions, after that letter, Nigel Farage did then issue a video update. Let's listen to that too.
There he was, panicked, in the rain, ill-prepared, calling an early general election which shocked and surprised all of us. He did it, of course, because no flights were going to Rwanda. He did it, of course, because he feared that I'd be back in the front line. Now, he may be relieved to know that I'm not going to stand as a candidate myself. Why? 6 weeks isn't long enough to fight a constituency seat and to campaign around the country. The bad news, Mr. Sunak, is I'll be out round the country fighting, campaigning, appearing on media, supporting Richard Tice in absolutely every single way. Only reform, in my view, has the agenda that can reverse our national decline. I'll do that, but I'll also, as the year goes on, be increasingly in America, because I think Trump back in the White House makes the world a much, much safer place. So for those who think, thank goodness, he's gone away. No, I haven't gone away at all. And at some point, I'll be back as a candidate as well. This just is not the right time for me. I've got one more big card to play in politics in my life. It's not now.
What do you think to that at home? I can tell you, so far, you're divided. Maggie says Nigel has done the intelligent thing. She says, why would anyone stand as an MP for reform, she says, when they're unlikely to get a single seat? Victor says he's made the right decision this time in 5 years' time. He should try and do it then. He says Labour will win this general election and then maybe a new genuine Tory party could come back. Robert says he thinks Farage is playing a blinder. He'll go to America, get Trump elected. We'll have a horrendous Starmer government, and then Farage will play a major role between the UK and the US. He says, and on the following election cycle, he reckons that Farage will come back as strong as ever and push hard in UK politics. Andy says it's hysterical that GB News is continuing with the Farage fetish. This is a man who's never even come close to winning as a constituency MP. He's even lost to a fella in a dolphin suit. He says Farage is a classic Me Too politician, i.e. me. The man is a busted flush, he says. Josh says, I've always thought Nigel was a patriot, but it seems he's putting America first. Kerry Dingle, what do you make to it all?
Well, I'm not on his team, Farage's, but I have certain respect for him, and he is a man of the people, and, you know, I supported Brexit all the way. However, I really object to this, what he put in his letter, even though he's not going to the States, about campaigning for Trump. Not because, as some people saying, oh, boo-hoo, he's not being patriotic. I think that's rubbish. You know, there's no way you can say Nigel Farage is not a patriot. But because he goes on and on about sovereignty, quite rightly, and we have no business interfering in the American election. I remember in the last one, and we had a similar thing over Brexit, The Guardian in 2019, urging its readers to write to friends in the States to vote for Biden. And I thought it was outrageous. It's interfering in other citizens' elections. And I think, you know, of course you can be friends with people all over the world and support them and argue your case in Britain about global politics and whether you support Trump or Biden. I think they're both a disaster. But to go over and campaign, there's something iffy about that.
Do you think? What do you think to that at home? Honestly, you really, really are divided. If you're perhaps a Reform candidate, I'm especially interested in hearing from you, because I've seen a couple of comments about that and the impact that that has had on your morale today. But I wonder, if you're a candidate for Reform, tell me your thoughts. Bob has said, he's got in touch and said, I feel Nigel Farage has let this country down with his decision not to stand today. Tim says, I know that people are disappointed that Nigel's not standing, but remember, he's done his best over many years to put Britain on what he thought was the right track. And he says, and let's all not forget, we could do with a decent trade deal with America. And if Nigel gets a prominent position, he reckons it would make that trade deal much, much easier. If he did stand, do you think he would have got elected?
I'm not 100% sure about that, and I do kind of buy his argument that he'd only had 6 weeks. But honestly, there'll be lots of candidates out there that nobody knows anything about, and at least Nigel would have had huge amounts of media coverage. So he's probably in better shape than most. So, you know, it'd be nip and tuck whether he got elected or not. But the migrant issue is so enormous within our politics now. The fact that he represents, we'll push the boats back, we're going to leave ECHR, those are two strands which would, I think, be an umbilical cord to ordinary people. And I think he stood a pretty good chance, frankly.
Yeah, and this whole, because we are coming into the summer, we mentioned, didn't we, that we've got about 10,000 people that have made those boat crossings so far, and this is a big key dividing line. Some people will say that they'll talk about the Uni Party and all the rest of it, but it is a big dividing line between the Tories and Labour, this Rwanda thing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Sunak will be whistling gypsy tunes, won't he? Because the truth about the matter is that, as good as Richard Tice is, he can't get the spotlight in the same way as Nigel could. And I noticed that immediately he climbed straight into Starmer, accusing him of offering, which is true, an amnesty to migrants coming into our country. So Sunak knows which button to press on this, and actually Nigel is the guy that invented the button. So why didn't he take the opportunity? Look, and the other thing is, you know, were he to get beaten, right, were he to get beaten, he could still go to America afterwards. By the way, what about the GB News chief executive? Isn't he asking where Nigel is going to be between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock most nights between July the 5th and November?
Well, we know the answer. He's not going to be hosting his regular show for that short-term period. I'm asking you on Twitter whether or not you think that Nigel Farage made the right decision or not. So far, 56% of you say yes, you think that he did make the right decision. Of course, then 44% thinks no, it's not. Tracy says, I can understand Farage's position. Let Labour get in and then mess up for a next term, she says, with their net zero and gender lunacy. And then you should pop up and give it a go next time. Do you think that he would? Do you think that he would actually pop back up the next occasion and get involved again? Who is this? Just got in touch. Keith says, I'm absolutely disgusted that Nigel is swanning off to the US after the election when he could be standing for the election. He says most of us joined Reform because we expected Nigel to be part of it. He says that he feels very disappointed by that alone, and that will be interesting. Michael says, without Farage, Reform is a wasted vote. And I saw a clip, actually, the Conservatives have gone on an attack line. They were actually saying Labour want you to vote for the Reform Party. I thought that was quite an interesting perspective to have as well, because obviously they're going into that neck of the woods, which is the Tories are going to be pushing that a vote for Reform will essentially be a vote for Labour. Of course, Reform would massively dispute that. And Colin says, how could Nigel do this to us all? He's made my little girl cry when I told her. Colin.
I totally buy that. No,
what? Colin's little girl wasn't crying.
No Nigel, no Reform. Okay?
Do you reckon?
I think their numbers, they're around about 9% right now. And most of that 9% is made up of people who thought that Farage was going to stand. And now that he isn't, I expect it to... I'm not saying it's going to go down dramatically, but it is not going to grow. With Farage, that number could have gone through 20% and would have destroyed, by the way, the Conservative Party.
Well, was you going to vote for reform? Did that, or has the goings-on today changed your opinion? I've just showed you that attack line then saying Starmer needs you to vote reform. What do you make to that? Get in touch all the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com, the email, or hop onto the website /yoursay and talk to me there. Also, coming up after the break, are you a prepper? Did you follow the emergency advice to have 3 days' worth of food? And also, let's look at the immigration numbers. They are going to be sky high. What do you think to it? See you in 2.
Hello, very good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Southern areas will stay mostly dry as we go through the end of the week, but it's a wetter story further north because the same area of low pressure that has brought all the rain we've had through the last day or so is lingering across the UK. So we can expect further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of today, overnight and into Friday. Some of the rain will be a little bit on the heavy side, but it is definitely easing. Further south, it's going to stay largely dry overnight, and there will be some clear skies under which it could turn a bit fresh, a bit chilly perhaps for some of us to start first thing tomorrow morning. But on the whole, once the sunshine gets going, temperatures should rise quite quickly. If we take a look at what's going to happen first thing tomorrow morning, and yes, it's a bit of a cloudy, damp start across many northern parts, particularly across a big chunk of Scotland. Cloud and outbreaks of rain. None of it looks particularly heavy, but could cause some further issues for areas affected by the heavy rain we've seen recently. Perhaps some brightness across western parts of Scotland, but across Northern Ireland, much of England and Wales, a fairly cloudy and a little bit damp start. The best chance of any sunshine first thing tomorrow morning will be across southern parts, and to be honest, here's where we're likely to see the best of the sunshine as we go through tomorrow. As a result of the sunshine, though, we could see a few showers popping up, but it is generally going to be drier towards southern parts, a little bit cloudier and a bit wetter further north. Some outbreaks of rain, perhaps the odd heavy shower here, but not as wet as it has been recently. The temperatures will be near normal for the time of year, feeling warm in any sunshine. In fact, across northern parts, it will feel markedly less fresh than it has done recently. As we go into Saturday, perhaps a bit of a chilly start for some of us, but it does look like the driest, sunniest day of the long weekend. A few showery outbreaks developing, particularly towards eastern parts. But on Sunday, we are expecting some more wet weather to push its way in. Some of that could be pretty heavy at times, and more showers perhaps on Monday too.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner with your very latest travel news. There are long delays on the Edinburgh City bypass. It's closed westbound at the Dreghorn Junction because of flooding. That's causing queues back onto the M8 and the other way back towards Dalkeith. On the A1 in Tyne Weir, the southbound exit is closed 65 at Bertley, along with 2 lanes on the main carriageway for emergency repairs. Queues back towards Newcastle. East London, the Cambridge Heath Road at Bethnal Green shut for accident investigation work. Still solid on the Essex stretch of the M25 anti-clockwise after a lorry broke down earlier on just after Waltham Abbey, and long delays on the M4 heading east of Swansea just after the Paul Talbot exit junction 40. The inside lanes closed where a car's broken down. Onto public transport, no Avanti West Coast trains still out of Preston to Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley because of flooding. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Kelvin Mackenzie and Kerry Dingle remain alongside me. Sandra's been in touch and said, please, will you get off the Prime Minister's back? He's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't. I'm absolutely sick of the bashing that he has had. The guy can't win, she says. Is that fair? What do you think to that? Do you share Sandra's opinion? Let's talk immigration, because some people say that this will be essentially the immigration election. And now, of course, we've just had the figures released, the ONS figures. And I can tell you, actually, depends what side of the fence you sit on here, because some people will say it's good news because the figure was out and it shows that the net migration, 685,000 was the number. It was down, though, I've got to say, 10% on last year. Hence, some people will try and sell this as a good news story. I'm not massively convinced myself. Kelvin Mackenzie.
Well, no, it's a massive number, isn't it? I mean, I read somewhere it's the size of Sheffield. You know, what are we going to do? We're going to start giving a round of applause to every time a new Sheffield is created in our country, where all of us know, and we don't need to go through it again. We've got schools that are bursting at the seams. We got you can't get in to see your doctor. They can't fix the potholes in the road, but we can get 68,000 people to come in. No, it is an immigration election. I totally buy that, and that's why, not wishing to bore everybody to death, why Farage was needed. And Nigel, if you're watching this tonight, I'd like you to reflect on what you're likely to say. I mean, you know, I want to hear your voice. Sunak is going to give it to it. Starmer is on the back foot on migration. OK, let's worry about that. He is not a winner on what is the most important political subject of our age. So I would like to know what he thinks about it. And his answer to that in his six things was that we are going to set up another border force. Oh, really? Well, how did the last border force do? What a ridiculous suggestion.
A border command unit.
Yes, the voters are not idiots. They know what's going on in our country, and I suspect anybody who has any brains will not vote for Labour on the basis of what they're going to do about migration.
Kerry?
Well, I profoundly disagree, because I know it's going to be a big election issue, but I think that's a tragedy, because even if we look at the figures and dissect the figures, 450,000 are legal migrants. They're people who've come here to work and with dependents. Our universities depend on them. Our healthcare system has depended on them. Now, people might not like it. There might be insufficient resources to cater for those people, but they're not coming here and sponging, and they've been allowed in. Now, I do believe we should have democratic control over our borders, and we should decide. The government allowed people to come here. They weren't all illegal. It's a complete myth. We should also be clear that 7 million on the waiting list for the NHS is not because of migrants. You know, the lack of housing is not because of migrants. And unfortunately, I think Sunak has been hoisted by his own petard. He's made it a big issue with a stupid, expensive, ridiculous policy with Rwanda, which has failed. And now it's going to be a number one issue.
It hasn't even started.
How do you know it's failed? It's not even got off the ground yet.
Exactly, but isn't that a failure? Do you think that's what?
Well,
it's
it's actually the lawyers. The lawyers have got in the way.
Well, it's not happening, is it?
No, it's true.
But whose fault is it that it's not happening?
Well, I think it's because it's a stupid plan in the first instance and couldn't work. I think that if Sunak and the government, and, you know, it goes back before him, had made a more sensible arrangement and diplomatic discussion with France to stop the boat crossings... No, are you saying that's impossible?
I would say that was impossible. They are delighted.
I don't believe it's impossible.
They are delighted to see 50,000.
I have a problem with illegal migration, not legal migration.
Okay.
And immigration being made this massive issue is going to, you know, outshine things that are much more serious for all of us. The eco-austerity that we've had is much more serious. I can't forgive Starmer or the Conservatives for what they did during COVID. You know, you stand at the other side of a window while your relatives die. You know, these authoritarians who locked us down, regardless of what was best for us, I will not forgive them, and we shouldn't have amnesia, and that was only 4 years ago. And now what, we're going to trust them to run the country?
What do you make to that? Do you agree with Kerry on that sentiment there or not? This will be so interesting, won't it, this situation about immigration, because this is where it's all going to get a little bit kind of, I would argue, quite nasty when we see what's happening, because bet your bottom dollar when that sun comes out, those channel crossings, they will start going through the roof. I've just told you about 10,000 people is the number so far, and you know that Labour, on their side of the fence, they have committed literally almost straight away to ripping up that Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak, of course, standing by that, but we also know that no planes will take off the ground before the next election date. But stranger things have happened, and never say never. What do you make of the immigration thing, and how important is it to you? Let me know after the break. I want to ask you, are you a prepper? Do you have yourself ready for the next potential national crisis? Because that was what the government was advising us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, alongside me, as is the director of the charity World Right, Kerry Dingle. Now, do you regard yourself as a bit of a prepper or not? I just want to get into this quickly. Lots of you sending in to me your political gaffes as well. I'll bring up a couple of those. But just very quickly, are you a prepper? The government have advised us now to have 3 days' worth of food. Kelvin?
I love going to Costco, and I bought a 48-pack of loo rolls just in case.
Just in case of what? To be a bout of diarrhoea?
No, just in case the Russians were coming, and it was difficult to get down to Waitrose.
Right, OK, that's a lovely insight that I've got of Kelvin on his throne, surrounded
by loo rolls. I'll be all right. I'll be selling them for £10 a roll.
Are you
absolute? I am for things in my household and going on holiday and families and trips with youngsters all over the world that I've organised for 30 years. But this is nuts. A few weeks ago, I visited that Cold War bunker in Essex that's now open to the public, former, nuclear shelter.
Right.
It was the grimmest hole, even though it had air conditioning. You're basically breathing stale air, and they reckoned you'd live a year underground. There were beds for 200, but they were planning on putting 600 in there, so you'd sleep in shifts. It was so grim and
Sounds like Talk TV.
It was great to see, but it was really grim, and I thought, if that was us, I'd take my chances outside.
Would you?
No.
I think I might delve into this story in a bit more detail perhaps tomorrow, because I found it fascinating and it hasn't really got as much pickup as I would suggest that it needs to. There's a whole new website launched about this, and it makes you question what on earth is actually going on. But look, so many people have picked up on Rishi Sunak, absolutely drenched and wet through. It's been called a huge political gaffe, and it's got me thinking, look at his back. Oh, Rishi, what was you thinking? Who in your group of people told you that would be a good idea? Well, where's your mum?
Where's your Mac?
Your mum won't let you go out and do those kind of things unattended, would she? Anyway, look, I've asked you guys what about your favourite political gaffe. Of course, the Ed Miliband, him chomping down on his bacon butty. No one's ever forgotten that one.
No, that's a belter. The one I liked was when, do you remember I think it was in 94, I think it was, when Kinnock fell over.
On top of Glennis, on the beach.
In the beach. That cheered me up, and he got a lot wetter than Sunak did. But if water is going to be a sign of whether you're going to do well or not, I'm afraid Rishi may be in trouble on that basis.
We do laugh. It is a British thing, though. You know that joke. We do laugh at
especially
disasters.
At politicians.
Yeah, but you know, British people in a French restaurant, waiter drops a tray, all the French look really, and all the Brits go, "Hey, go, my son."
The Gordon Brown one. Do you remember this one? This one came up top of the list. Let's remind ourselves what Gordon Brown did wrong.
Good, and it's very nice to see you. Take care.
Thanks, Gordon.
That was a disaster.
What did she say?
Oh, everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman.
Right. Do you remember that? I can tell you that caused a lot of problem. Yeah. That was Gillian Duffy, that woman. And he basically said she was a bigot. Peter says, and Matthew, you've both come up with the same ones. Can we remember the Maybot when she danced? Theresa May danced onto the stage.
That was a shock,
there that was. The letters were falling off the wall behind her. It was, and then do you remember? Yeah, didn't someone pop up and hand a P45 or something to her?
Yeah, that's right.
Peter says, I wish she'd taken it.
No, when she came onto that stage, it's a good job we haven't got the video because you kind of turn away from it. Do you remember she was dancing to it?
Of course, it was ABBA. It was ABBA, Dancing Queen, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
And someone is saying, like, it was like she was walking the plank to her own political public death.
Oh, well, that's a bit strong, isn't it?
The John Prescott one. Do you remember that one? Have we got that John Prescott?
Jaguars. Yeah. Was that
the Punch one.
Yeah.
Oh,
look at this one.
Oh, yeah, no,
bang.
I like that one.
You like that one?
That's an absolute belter, that is.
Is literally a belter?
Yeah, that's an absolute belter. And the guy was an absolute piece of work who did it. And he got done, didn't he, in the end?
Well, do you know, I don't condone violence, obviously. I don't think you should go around walloping people. But I do kind of think that if people actually thought there were a few consequences to some of the things that they did, people might actually think twice about some of the shenanigans that they get up to in this day and age. Anyway, look, who would be a politician in this day and age? You've run, didn't you? I ran. Did. There's only Kelvin. We need to convince Kelvin.
I stood as an independent.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah. And
I take it all back.
Yeah, thank you to the people of Weybridge.
Well, there you go. That's what he thinks about you. Look, thank you for your company. Thanks to you at home, Farage. Up next, Nanites.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Southern areas will stay mostly dry as we go through the end of the week, but it's a wetter story further north because the same area of low pressure that has brought all the rain we've had through the last day or so is lingering across the UK. So we can expect further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of today, overnight and into Friday. Some of the rain will be a little bit on the heavy side, but it is definitely easing. Further south, it's going to stay largely dry overnight, and there will be some clear skies under which it could turn a bit fresh, a bit chilly perhaps for some of us to start first thing tomorrow morning. But on the whole, once the sunshine gets going,